Hopefully this is the last segment I'll need to record. Obviously this will be the last video before the vote takes place. If Remain wins, I highly doubt I'll be in the mood to record anything or participate on my various social media that I've linked below. But anyway, hopefully this will be interesting in some respects, independently of what the result is. I wanted to talk about different political traditions and different arguments from my own for the UK leaving the EU. I'm just going to mention briefly the arguments I find compelling. There is kind of a selfish argument. I feel like Britain would have better ties to North America being outside the EU. It's completely absurd that they don't have a current trade deal with the United States or Canada. I'm not going to defend TTIP, but the UK is actually objecting to that, and that's the current deal on offer with the United States. Commentators have suggested there'll be a superficial, nominal change to it, but it'll go forward basically as is. I don't know if the UK would maintain an objection or not, or like Dave Cameron is with the referendum, just pretending it's a complete overhaul when it's clearly not. I think that commentary is probably correct. But anyway, if that's not correct, then they have to start from scratch, and who knows how long it could take to work out some separate agreement. The other things that are important to me is that, the United Kingdom forms a basis of a lot of our laws and our ideas of human rights and things like that. I don't mean human rights in the modern sense, but more the classically liberal sense of, which should be the basic civil rights of a society, basically the things that ended up being in the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution, and some of those things, like the jury of your peers and whatnot, were part of the Magna Carta, but they're also the classically liberal tradition that developed in the 1700s and 1800s, and that's kind of one of the things that I'll mention briefly in this is that's kind of the starting point is people that consider themselves in the liberal tradition. First thing I'm going to post below is by Peter Shore. He was actually a member of Harold Wilson's cabinet when he made the argument. So I think it's a really telling video. It's pretty clear that he knew what they had already signed up just from that couple of years in government. He seemed to know what was up, and he was also shadow minister for Europe shortly before they entered the common market. And it's interesting to compare some of the early 1970s labor arguments to the early 1990s conservative arguments. And I might say this at another point in this, because I've made it in a couple different installments, but the Margaret Thatcher no speech that she gave had some parallels. There's another kind of interesting character. I hope people don't focus in on Enoch Powell and George Galloway as me saying that they're people that are good people or good people to follow. Because in a lot of, like I say, when I talk about George Galloway, there's a lot of things in there that I don't endorse or support at all. One of the things about Enoch Powell was he really exaggerated what the immigration was at the time. Now to the point where within the near future there could be some of the risk to society that Enoch Powell talked about. I'm linking a couple of things from Peter Hitchens. One of them is, I guess you can call it an interview with Owen Jones. The only reason I'm subscribed to Owen's YouTube channel is he has videos like this where he just kind of hangs out with somebody that is not of a political agreement with him. I think he's done a few of these where, you definitely have a different political outlook, but he's unlike a lot of journalists in these kind of settings. He does seem genuinely interested in what the other person's outlook is, and isn't trying to make them look bad. Or even though I don't care for a lot of his, I've enjoyed at least a couple of these videos that I've seen. But anyway, I only want to draw attention to about 10 minutes or so after I time-stamped it, because he kind of talks about what's become of the Conservative Party, and he also talks a little bit about Enoch Powell. I think he's correct in saying that Enoch Powell was trying to cultivate this cult following for himself, but ironically, he argued for people to vote Labor in I think there were two elections in 1974, but at least in the second election that Harold Wilson won, because he wanted the referendum. Other one's the Skeptic Isle, which is about what went on at the time of the referendum, how they ended up in there, which is, I don't want to talk much about Thunderfoot again, but he did another video about how the UK ended up in there in the first place, and basically they ended up there through deception and dishonesty. And the Peter Shore video covers it a little bit, but people were voting for trade reasons and trade access, and as I believe I've mentioned separately, they were voting for access to goods where otherwise there was a good number of trade barriers. There was still a protectionist tinge to the Labor Party that I don't completely agree with, and that's also the case with some of the unions that support leaving. But anyway, this is actually the first time I've kind of come to respect some of the intellectual arguments of some of the people that are Labor supporters. And older Labor supporters, as I've mentioned, unfortunately, a lot of them have passed away, like a Tony Benn. I'm going to post a couple of his. I don't just mean the Labor Party. I mean the leadership of the Labor movement. There was a guy named Bob Crow that died not too long ago that was a good spokesman on some of these trade things. And Kate Hoey. And, I'm also linking to a video by one of the Green Party members of the House of Lords. She talks about how there are a number of environmental things that the EU actually gets in the way of, that Sweden is prevented from encouraging people to buy local produce. This wasn't something she mentioned, but there are other issues I've heard about with the different environmental things being pushed in the UK. I believe there's still some coal-fired power plants. They run efficiently if they keep going at a certain amount of their capacity. I think it might be 80-something% of their capacity, but they're most efficient if they just keep going, not if they're powered up and powered down based on whether it's windy or there's solar power they can use or things like that. And I don't think there's a whole lot of solar power. Also, I'm glad I waited to today that there was actually someone, I've never heard of him before, but he goes by Lord Sugar, and apparently he took offense at the fact that Gisela Stewart, apparently he takes offense at the idea that she's making arguments about whether to be in or not in the EU, even though she's born in Germany, which is really strange because I thought the whole idea of remaining was to be a big inclusive unit where everybody's all one big happy family and can go across borders and be welcomed and a part of the civic debate and things like that. But no, I think that the mask slipped so far that the Remain people, especially the wealthy Remain people, at least who aren't drones of the Labour Party, there were a couple of other parties as well, but the Lib Dems and some of the other groups that I would characterize as on the left side of the debate have a few. I think I covered most of the things I wanted to highlight. I might have to put a placard in a couple of spots to say what I'm doing, because I don't really have a lot of time to assemble all of this exactly the way I want to. But I don't know how much of a UK audience I'm getting. I know a lot of people have already voted anyway. Started this just based on the theoretical possibility that I could use my platform such as it is. Although I've been shocked by how much my meme page has grown in the last 2 weeks, especially. It's just been overwhelming. I've never had that attention to something I've worked on online before. Even if the vote doesn't go our way, I'm still grateful for this experience. It's my intellect and understanding of the history and the current situation in British and European politics has expanded. I'll be so happy for the citizens of the United Kingdom if they vote the right way on this. But I do want to say that if they stay, I'll still be interested to see if UKIP, or who knows, there could be other group that combine the Eurosceptic wing of the Conservatives with the more libertarian outlook, and who knows, maybe it could be a movement that incorporates more young people than UKIP has. That's Peter Hitchens' outlook, is that UKIP's not the answer. I don't know that's true. I think if they don't win this, or they don't capitalize on the situation going forward. The whole idea is, I think this is important to mention, just for the fact that if someone's watching this and the UK voted to remain in the EU, not, completely negative, the idea of UKIP is to eventually kind of unseat at least the Conservative Party in its current form. And parallel, and this has been mentioned by both political scientists and by Nigel himself, they're trying to follow at least a similar path to the Reform Party of Canada. How that party worked was, it started as a regional party in Western Canada, which is more libertarian, less cosmopolitan sort of part of Canada. I think some of the supporters were the same, some older people that had lost interest in mainstream Canadian politics, but it's a very different country from the UK, from different geographic locations. Obviously, it wasn't they didn't have any members of the Canadian House of Commons. They won a by-election, and then the Conservative Party just absolutely collapsed. The leader of the party resigned, and they were known as the Progressive Conservatives at the time. Prime Minister Kim Campbell, even if she had done a good job, she was basically a lamb to a slaughter going into that election. And the party was just completely wiped out. They had like 3 seats or something like that left afterward, and the Reform Party had taken all of the seats they realistically could in Western Canada. That it wasn't like the scale of the SNP in Scotland in the last election, but there are probably some similar races where they went from 4th to 1st. But anyway, that became the dominant conservative strain of Canada, and the little handful of viable national figures that were progressive conservatives joined up with the Reform Party, and they became the Conservative Party, and they dropped the progressive bit. But that's the kind of revolution people on the right are hoping for. And I'm also hopeful that both the sort of free market wing and the sort of nationalist wing, I think they'd both be strengthened by the presence of the Eurosceptic movement that the UK provides. So that is one thing that, the UK withdrawing from the European Union, it would be bad for the European Union in that they won't have these Eurosceptic groupings anymore. There are potential aspects of staying in that can be interesting from a political science perspective and from the perspective of potentially seeing a movement across Europe against the current EU project. So that's something that I would still anticipate. I'm not going to forget about the whole thing and just not care about Europe anymore and just leave them all to their own devices or whatever. I did become knowledgeable about the European Union because of the UK, and even though I would be disappointed, to say the least, in the UK electorate if they vote to remain, I wouldn't be able to say that I didn't anticipate it. I wouldn't be able to say that I didn't understand it, because there are so many pressures applied to people, from baseless allegations of racism to trying to conflate this woman who was murdered, try to say that they all need to vote for something she believed in, along with the implication that Thomas Mayer was a representative of Leave campaign, which is completely ridiculous. You really can't be surprised that these horrible classless things people are doing might sway a small majority of the at least of the winnable electorate. I'm not going to give up on the whole thing and just wash my hands of what's going on over there. But apologies in advance if it's too chopped up or whatever, but I had realized this was going to be my last video before the referendum, and I just had to fit certain things in there. But what I'm trying to do here is cover the angles that I didn't feel like I had adequately covered on my own or in previous videos and previous things that I've linked to. I'll leave it there.